we are this fixed entity that has to be a certain way, and that what goes on in our lives, what we do in our lives reflects on that or is limited by that. And we kind of create an entire world to conform to the story of me. And when we start seeing through that a little bit, when anyone starts glimpsing that who they are is not the story or the cumulative stories or from the past or of the future, that it's not limited to whatever kind of person you've made up that you are and collected evidence to prove that it's really who you are, well, then life's not quite as hard as we think it is. Most things are pretty straightforward. It's kind of obvious what to do most of the time, and when it isn't, it's obvious not to do anything. But we're really not comfortable with not existing in the way that we think we do. I mean, it's really uncomfortable, but no, I'm me, right? Look.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful Zen book called On Having No Head, where Douglas Harding, the author, basically suggests as a sort of a self-awareness experiment to just try and find your head, right? And you cannot see your head. Like, you can look in a mirror and see a head over there that you've been told is representative of a head over here. You can feel this and go, well, something's here. But fundamentally, but for the reflection from life, we have no head. We have even the body, which seems so solid and real, doesn't necessarily look the way we think it looks. Now, it's a thought experiment. I get it. I'm not saying you have no head, oh, right? But it points to the idea that we think our personalities are solid. We think our life experiences have made us a certain way, or our genetics have made us a certain way, or our parents have made us a certain way, or something that happened in our past has made us a certain way. And we're not even that solid physically. Like, we're not even as sure of that we even have a head, right? So I'm not going to kind of really argue with anybody about whether or not they have a head, right? I'm pretty sure that probably you do. But if you're not even capable of knowing you have a head, other than because everyone tells you and it's common sense and it's obvious and blah, 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 then why are you so sure that you're a shy person or an outgoing person or a proactive or reactive or working too hard or not working hard enough? Like, we make up all these distinctions and then suffer from them. And it's innocent. We all do it. It's not some weird thing that you've got that I don't have. It's just that when we see it for what it is, it doesn't hold us back in the same way. And that's why I say that's the handbrake. Because we think we can only go as fast as this person will let us. But this person is continually being made and remade out of thought, out of story. And the second we drop the story, everything's up for grabs in a really good way. We fall into a place of possibility. We fall into a place of pure potential. We fall into a space of vastness. And then we shrink back down and start thinking we're us again and get caught up in all of that crap. And then we fall out of it again. So it's almost like the handbrake keeps coming on and going off and coming on and going off, but we get longer and longer periods without it. We all already have times where we're not in it, where we're just so in whatever we're doing. Our attention is so out there that this doesn't get in the way. It's just most of the time, half our attention or more is here. And yeah, we're not made to work that way. It's like shining a flashlight in your face and wondering why you can't see anything. Like, nothing's wrong with the flashlight or your face. You just have to aim it the other way if you actually want to see what's going on out there. And then you'll go much faster because you're not blind.
I feel it is real. Every experience is real to us. That's the power of thought and consciousness. It's like, we're not saying it's not real. To us in that moment, thought creates an experience that looks real. It looks real to me that there's a coffee cup in my hand. It looks real that there was a pen here a moment ago. It's real here that you're here. Now, at some level I understand that it can't be, right? This is all, everything we see is thought. But it looks really real to us. So I never want to deny somebody's experience and say, oh, don't worry, it's not real, right? It's just your thinking, don't worry about it. Instead, what I point people to when they ask me like, so what do I do when I'm having a panic attack? I see that, and there's kind of an analogy, I might have put this in my book, but actually it's slightly different to what I shared in my book, but it's like someone coming to you and saying, I've got a head cold, what can I do? And you're like, well, you'll do whatever you know to do. So you'll probably have a tissue and you might take some paracetamol and you might lie in bed for a bit, or you might go for a walk, or you might wrap up warm, or you might sweat it out, or you might have a bath, or like, you do whatever you know to do. In the case of a panic attack, you might run away screaming, you might breathe in and out of a paper bag, you might collapse on the floor, you might go and sit in the corner, you might ring someone and tell them to take you home. It's all allowed. You'll do whatever you do. You can't do anything other than you know to do in that moment. But here's the good news, right? We're going upstream of that behavior. So if you imagine a cold, this understanding is like teaching somebody about their immune system and helping them improve and strengthen their immune system so that they'll just over time have a tendency to get fewer colds. And when they do have a cold, it'll feel awful, but it will pass. And we'll do whatever we know to do in the moment. And that might change, right? Cold 1, we might know to bundle up in bed and cancel everything out of our diary. And cold 2, it might look like we go out anyway, even though we've got a cold. As our understanding changes, what we know to do in the moment about each panic attack changes. And we know that we got it covered upstream. We're looking after our immune system. We are building our understanding such that what you notice is the panic attacks start to become further and further apart. They pass sooner. They're less scary. And eventually, in my experience, they disappeared altogether. That parallel with like looking at the immune system, we're doing something fundamental, foundational underneath all of it. So go ahead and have as many colds as you do. It's not like you can stop them. Go ahead and have as many panic attacks as you want. It doesn't worry me. It doesn't concern me. I know you're taking care of it upstream by being in this conversation. If you keep looking, job done, that those things are going to get less severe. They're going to be less frequent. And chances are they'll disappear altogether. So I'm not really worried about how many colds you get on the journey. I know they're horrible when you get them. I know I've had many colds. I know how crappy they are. If I can hand you the paper bag because I'm next to you, I will. But I know, like, don't worry about it. Like, I know we're taking care of it upstream. And the same if you're having a pile of insecure thought about a presentation, that thought's already here. You can't do anything with it once it's here, but it will go. It will move on over. And over time, you'll just find that your next presentation doesn't look as scary, and your next one and your next one. And at some point, you'll find yourself doing a presentation going, I don't normally do that. Like, how did that happen? And you won't be able to pinpoint when, but somehow, incrementally, because everything was changing behind the scenes, what shows up on the surface looks different.
There's the living space in the middle. There's the attic up above. And there's the basement. Right? Okay, now imagine that in the basement of every human being is the wisest, friendliest, most loving, compassionate being in the world. Okay? Now, most people, when they feel stressed, tension, or insecure, run up to the attic and they get caught up in thinking. You can just see it. The vast majority of adults, when they feel stressed, tension, or upset, think harder and more about life, right? There's static in the attic. Okay, as people begin to understand the nature of thought, they start to have this insecure thinking, and then they fall away from that thinking. They come down out of their personal thinking. Some people say you go from your head to your heart. The heart is the basement. And we fall onto there, we're wide open, and then this wise being shows up that all we need to do is, when we fall open, fall away from what we're thinking, come back to the now. This being always shows up when we're in the now. Until the day comes, you realize that wise being in the basement is your true self. It's not another person, it's not somebody else. It literally is your true self. You thought it was a different person. It's you. It's you. It's not ego, right? If a person doesn't know that their true self is always here underneath all their personal thinking, that's what we call ego. It's identifying with only part of who we are. And when we fall out of ego and fall out of personal thinking, this other person always shows up, the confident one that you didn't think was there, the smart one in terms of common sense, the creative one that you didn't think you were shows up and brings new thinking that's responsive to your life and possibilities. I love that the other person is there. It's a metaphor, obviously. I love that we have this wise being in the basement that shows up when we are in open house rather than closed house in the attic. Uptight. Oh God, I'm so worried and uptight and anxious, and oh, that's thought. And then there's resting open in the living room, right? And then the other person shows up. Self-esteem, your well-being, your true self shows up, and suddenly you're surprised by how well you're doing. So it's nice to know that the wise being is in the basement all the time for every human being. Right? How great a message to tell kids. Right? Right? You have within you everything you need to live a good life, to have fun, to enjoy yourself, to deal with problems. It's already there in you. Right? My book, Coming Home, means we feel out of sorts and uncomfortable, and then we wake up to thought. We wake up out of our conditioned thinking, our judgments, our negative thoughts. We fall into this comfortable space where we start feeling more presence, more peace. And then, without doing anything, we start to fill up with feelings that uplift, and we start filling up with new thinking that's helpful, practical, useful. Right? So I called my book Coming Home, Uncovering the Foundations, basement, the foundations of well-being, of psychological well-being. So the good news is, even though we get lost in the content of our thinking, we can all wake up and have an understanding that allows us to be okay with falling into this quiet, open space. Why is that? Because we know that's where wisdom meets us. That's where the other person shows up and takes over and lives us beautifully. I've seen no exception to that. I have seen no exception to that. No matter who I'm working with, no matter what their past has been like, no matter what their personality is like, no matter how they were raised, no matter how they were treated, every human being, this is the good news, can wake up out of thinking that weighs on us and limits us, can rest in the now, and then fill with feelings that uplift and thinking that helps guide us through life and to deal with things with common sense.